Surrounded at Sekigahara, 1,500 warriors against 80,000. Their men gave a single order, bore straight through the enemy. How did one clan survive 700 years without ever truly surrendering? The answer is here. 700 years, 3 unifiers, 0 victories. The Shimazu clan defied every ruler who tried to break them, and survived into the modern age. How did one family from Japan's remote south outlast them all? In 1185, as Minamoto no Yoritomo dismantled Japan's old imperial order and forged the first shogunate, he rewarded loyal allies with land. One such man was Shimazu Tadahisa, appointed steward of 3 wild southern provinces at the tip of Kyushu. The posting seemed minor, almost an afterthought. Kyushu was remote, rugged, frequently dangerous. But Tadahisa planted roots in that volcanic soil, and for the next 7 centuries, no power in Japan, no matter how absolute, would ever fully pull those roots out. For 400 years, the Shimazu clan consolidated their grip on southern Kyushu with quiet persistence. While the rest of Japan tore itself apart through civil wars and the Muromachi shogunate's slow collapse, the Shimazu refined their military culture in isolation. Their soldiers were trained to attack ferociously, to press forward regardless of casualties, and to never, under any circumstances, retreat in shame. That philosophy, forged over centuries of border wars with rival Kyushu clans, would define everything that followed. By the 1570s, 4 brothers had transformed this regional power into something terrifying. Shimazu Yoshihisa, Yoshihiro, Toshihisa, and Iehisa, commanding a unified army with unprecedented coordination, launched a campaign to do what no Japanese clan had ever done: conquer all of Kyushu. Their tactics became legendary. They mastered firearms, combined arms warfare, and a flanking maneuver called the Crane Wing, a devastating double envelopment that left opposing armies with nowhere to run. One by one, the great Kyushu lords began to fall. In 1578, the Otomo clan, rulers of northern Kyushu and one of the island's most powerful houses, marched south with an army of 50,000 men. At the Battle of Mimikawa, the Shimazu obliterated them. Using their crane wing formation with devastating precision, they reduced a 50,000-strong army to a fleeing remnant in a single afternoon. It was one of the most complete battlefield victories in Sengoku history, and it announced to all of Japan that something dangerous was rising in the south. By 1587, the Shimazu controlled almost all of Kyushu. The great Ryuzoji clan had been crushed. The Otomo were broken. The last holdouts were begging Toyotomi Hideyoshi, now ruler of Japan, to intervene. Shimazu Yoshihisa stood at the threshold of an achievement no Kyushu lord had ever reached: total unification of Japan's second-largest island. Then, word came from the north. Hideyoshi, was mobilizing. And the number of soldiers he was sending south was not 10,000, not 50,000. It was over 200,000. The Shimazu had never faced anything like it. Hideyoshi's army arrived in an overwhelming tide, over 200,000 troops advancing from the north in coordinated columns. Every clan that might have aided the Shimazu had already submitted. Within weeks, fortress after fortress fell. Even the formidable Shimazu war machine had no answer for an opponent this size. Yoshihisa convened his commanders and made the only rational choice available: negotiation. The clan of the untouchable South would bow to Hideyoshi, but it would not be the last word.
But bowing did not mean breaking. Yoshihisa's submission was a masterwork of political survival. He surrendered personally to Hideyoshi, offering his clan's fate to the conqueror's mercy. Hideyoshi, to the surprise of many, accepted. He could not afford months, perhaps years of bloody pacification in the Shimazu's own terrain. He returned their core provinces, Satsuma and Osumi. They lost the territories they had newly conquered, but the clan's heart remained intact. The Shimazu had lost a campaign without losing their identity.
What Hideyoshi didn't fully grasp was how little had actually changed within Satsuma's borders. The Shimazu paid formal tribute, sent hostages, participated in Hideyoshi's national campaigns, including the disastrous invasion of Korea. They performed all the rituals of submission, but inside their domain, they governed exactly as they always had. Military training continued, independent spirit endured. They were not conquered subjects, but partners in a fiction of obedience. A fiction that would last until the next great crisis revealed whether a single submission had truly ended 7 centuries of unbreakable will.
Then came 1600, and the decision that should have ended everything. When Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari's rivalry finally exploded into war at Sekigahara, the Shimazu ended up on the western side. Shimazu Yoshihiro commanded roughly 1,500 men. The eastern forces numbered over 80,000. When the Western coalition collapsed around him, Yoshihiro found himself surrounded, outnumbered 50-1, with no road home. Any rational commander would have surrendered. Yoshihiro called his officers together and gave the most audacious order in Japanese military history. The order was simple: charge forward, not retreat, not surrender, straight through Ieyasu's main formation toward the road home. What followed became legend. 1,500 Shimazu warriors smashed into 80,000 enemies and cut a corridor through the chaos. Men fell in waves. The rearguard died, buying the vanguard seconds to escape. Yoshihiro himself rode through the killing ground as arrows struck the air around him. He lost over half his men, but he walked out the other side. It remains one of the most reckless, improbable, and celebrated feats of arms in samurai history.
When Yoshihiro finally reached Satsuma, battered and depleted, all of Japan assumed Ieyasu would finish the job. The Shimazu had fought against him. They had humiliated his army on the road home. Retribution seemed inevitable. But Ieyasu calculated carefully. The Shimazu remained powerful within their own terrain.
to reign where a pacification campaign would be brutal and unpredictable. He allowed Yoshihiro's son, Tadatsune, to submit formally and retain the Satsuma and Osumi domains. For the second time in a generation, a ruler of Japan had chosen not to destroy the Shimazu, and chosen to live with the consequences.
The Shimazu, under Tokugawa rule, played by the rules on the surface. They sent their lord to Edo as required. They paid their taxes. They avoided open rebellion for over 2.5 centuries. But inside Satsuma's borders, a different Japan persisted. The domain maintained its own military traditions, its own economic networks, its own semi-independent culture. The samurai class within Satsuma were kept in a state of readiness that the Tokugawa system was gradually draining from the rest of Japan. The Shimazu were not subdued. They were waiting.
In 1609, the Shimazu made a move that revealed exactly how much autonomy they still possessed. Without explicit Tokugawa permission, they invaded the Ryukyu Kingdom, the independent island chain between Kyushu and China, and forced its king to submit. From that point forward, Satsuma controlled a unique back channel to Asian trade, feeding the domain wealth the Tokugawa could not fully monitor or tax. The Ryukyu remained nominally independent, but in practice, it was Shimazu territory. It was economic defiance dressed as regional administration, and the Tokugawa let it stand.
By the 1800s, Japan faced a crisis it had never prepared for. Western imperial power at its shores. While other domains panicked, Shimazu Nariakira saw clearly what was coming. He built Japan's first modern industrial infrastructure inside Satsuma. Reverberatory furnaces, steamships, textile mills, and groomed 2 young men of enormous talent, the towering, charismatic Saigo Takamori and the coldly brilliant Okubo Toshimichi. Both would become architects of modern Japan. Both were shaped by the Shimazu culture of fierce independence. The clan that had refused to surrender to Hideyoshi was now preparing for an entirely different kind of war.
The Meiji Restoration of 1868 ended the samurai age, and it was led by samurai from Satsuma. Saigo Takamori and Okubo Toshimichi, alongside their Choshu allies, orchestrated the overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate that had governed Japan for over 2.5 centuries. The new Meiji government dismantled feudal domains, abolished the samurai class, and transformed Japan into a modern nation-state with frightening speed. The clan that had once fought to preserve its feudal independence was now the force dismantling feudalism itself. History rarely produces ironies this sharp.
But the transformation was not painless. In 1877, the man who had helped create the new Japan turned against it. Saigo Takamori, disillusioned by the Meiji government's abandonment of the samurai code, raised an army of Satsuma warriors and marched on Tokyo. The Satsuma Rebellion was the last major armed uprising of the samurai class. The new conscript army, equipped with Western weapons, crushed it. Saigo died on a hillside above Kagoshima, either killed in battle or by his own hand.
The last great Shimazu warrior, the last samurai in the truest sense, was gone.
700 years. The Shimazu survived not because they were invincible, but because they understood something their enemies never fully grasped. That real power cannot be broken by a single battle, a single submission, or a single transformation. It endures through identity, through culture, through the refusal to let the core of who you are be taken. They bowed to Hideyoshi. They survived Sekigahara. They outlasted the Tokugawa. And when the samurai age finally ended, it was Shimazu men who ended it, on their own terms. They never surrendered. They simply changed the battlefield.
Next time on Samurai Chronicles, he started with a single impoverished village, the smallest, least significant holding in all of Western Japan. Through deception, intelligence, and 3 decades of calculated brilliance, Mori Motonari built an empire spanning 10 provinces and became the undisputed master of the Chugoku region. He never relied on brute force alone. He won by engineering situations where his enemies had no choice but to destroy each other. Next episode, the man who built an empire using only his mind.
The Shimazu story is Japan's story in miniature. The tension between submission and survival, between bending to power and preserving what cannot be surrendered. For 7 centuries, this clan held something that even the greatest armies could not take, a sense of who they were that no conquest could extinguish. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and share it with someone who loves history. And come back next time, because the next story is just as extraordinary.